So last time we were talking about why we don't blow the shofar, and we said we started with the fact that Hashem created the world with two different call it mechanisms, if you want. One of them is what he calls ilah ve'alul, and the second one he calls it labshut. So really, another way to say this, ilah ve'alul was the classical Jewish philosophy term for this. And that's all they talked about. They could only talk about this. If you all the way to Chassid, all the way to Kabbalah, all the people, and that's why he says the Pardes, because the Pardes is really the intermediate stage between philosophy and Kabbalah. Yeah, we talked about this once. That Jewish thought developed in three stages. There was first Jewish philosophy, which was very close or very much influenced by the Greek philosophy, through the Muslims of the time when they still actually read and wrote something. And then for a while it developed on its own. You had some disagreement with this. The main person who disagreed with building philosophy, Jewish philosophy, on Greek philosophy was Kreskas, Chazdai Kreskas. And he was the biggest opponent of the Rambam, who built his whole philosophy theoretically on the foundations of Greek. No. Rabbit accepted the direction. There was a third Rabbit, who was somebody else, who was already close to Kabbalah. Chazai Kreskas, in a certain sense, is closer to Kabbalistic thinking also. But they come from different places. You know, there's three different Rabbits, all functioning in the 13th century, or the 12th century, so there's all kinds of problems with that. But the Pardes, Rav Moshe Cordovero, what he wrote was an intermediate stage. So he already knew Zohar, and he wrote a big parish on the Zohar called Dor Yakar, and he wanted to write a parish on the Idrot, and a lot of things that he wanted to do. But in the end, he uses language that is philosophical in its vocabulary, but already Kabbalistic in its understanding. But even he doesn't yet have the concept of islabshus, of enclothement. And the one who really brings this in, this concept, is the Arizal. And he begins to build all of his Kabbalah on hitlabshut, and that's basically what the Alter Rebbe is saying here. He's saying that from ilah ve'alul, which is the Greek form of imagining the creation of the world, based on a mechanism that goes from what we call the evolutionary mechanism, of billiard balls. It's a mechanical interpretation. One thing hits the other and it continues on. And there's nothing in the effect that's not already in the cause. Comes the Arizal and brings us Islabshus, and Islabshus allows for something new. And how does it allow for something new? So we gave the example yesterday of the neshama being inside the body, and the body being able to do things that the neshama can't. And yet, the body is entirely reliant on the neshama for its life force. Maybe not its existence, because the body can continue to exist after the neshama is gone. But it doesn't do anything. It's lost its life force. Okay. And now he says, so we saw this. Okay? We saw that yesterday. So we'll go to the end of the parentheses. Vinel b'china rishona. So it's about 12 lines down, 15 lines down. At the beginning of a line. Vinei al b'china rishona. Meaning the ilah ve'alul, the evolutionary way, the Jewish philosophy construct of creation. Amru Chazal, there has to be some basis in Chazal. Rambam would not have used Greek philosophy if he didn't find that there was some mention of the same ideas in the sages. Where do the sages say this? They say, "Karsulei achayot keneged kulan, shokei achayot keneged kulam, karnei achayot keneged kulam. שכל הגבוה גבוה מחברו, מקיף את חברו, שתחתון בטל אליו, ונחשב כלא ממש." This is called גבוה, in the Medrash, this is called גבוה מעל גבוה שומר. That there's always something before you that includes everything that you will be able to do. Okay, and he describes it here using, I think this is from one of the Midrashim, I'm not sure where the source is, meaning the ankles of the animals. Which animals? We're talking about Chayot HaKodesh, about some angels they're under everything. Shokei chayot, the thighs of the animals are under everything. Karnei chayot, the horns that they have, they're also under everything. What does he want to say? That each stage has everything of the next stage entirely encompassed. Meaning the next stage can't do something that the previous stage doesn't want it to do. It can do nothing like that. So that's called, in the Medrash, it's interesting, maybe I'm mistaken, but in the Medrash this is called Gavoa Mal Gavoa Shomer. This is how the Marzu, who was the biggest commentary on the Medrash Rabbah, he also has a short work on the 32 principles of the Medrash, and that's how he explains Gavoa Mal Gavoa Shomer, exactly using this example. Not this example exactly, but the same idea. V'nechshav kelo mamash legabei ha'elyon, and the lower, meaning the effect, is like nothing compared to the cause. V'lachen amru shekal sulev shukei achiyot shem b'chinat nehi. Now he's translating this to us into Kabbalistic language. So the ankles and the thighs are like nehi. They're the two of the parts of the netzach hod yesod, of the victory, acknowledgement, foundation of the angels. שהיא הבחינה יותר אחרונה, שבחינת כוללת שבחיות, כוללות כל המדרגות שלמטה מהם. So they include everything that's under them. וקרני החיות, the horns, הם בבחינת כתר שבראש. They're like the crown. So that includes everything that's under it. והוא כולל יותר. It's even more encompassing because it includes everything that came under that. In any case, that's an example. וזוהי בחינת ייחוד העילה בעשר ספירות דאצילות, דאיהו וחיו אחד. And the interesting thing here now he says is that this type of thinking, that's how things are in Atzilus. In Atzilus he says, Iu v'chayo ichad. What does it mean, Iu v'chayo ichad? That the light and the kli and the vessel are one. What do we mean that it's one? That there's nothing in the effect, meaning in the kli, in the vessel that's not already in the light.
But there's nothing formed yet. Where's the caring from?
Tzilus has a kelim, of course. It's orot v'kelim. No, Tzilus is entirely. Not only that, it's already orot and kelim, meaning it's separate lights and separate vessels. It's not like in a kudim, which was long before that, where there was only one vessel. There was always a vessel. The moment you get to Adam Kadmon, there's vessels. Before Adam Kadmon, there's places without any vessels. And even there's vessels, because in Chassidus, when we analyze the texts that deal with what happened before Adam Kadmon, before the first Tzimtzum, so there's also an aspect of vessels. It's not entirely absent. In any case, דהיינו ייחוד וביטול התחתון בעליון, שהגם שיש 10 ספירות חוכמה חסד, even though there's 10 sfirot there, the lower one is entirely annulled and like encompassed, like we said, dependent entirely for its very existence on the higher one. So even though there's chokhmah and there's chesed, we're talking about the right axis of the sfirot, wisdom and loving kindness. Chesed anafa chokhmah, and it's chesed, loving kindness, is just an extension of wisdom. שנמשך מבחינת החוכמה להיות נאצל גם מבחינת החסד, and בחינה זו מורגשת להיות יש ודבר. As no, you can't sense the chesed, the loving kindness, being anything separate from the chokhmah. It's something new, but it's just an expression, meaning the chokhmah already had this in it. The example, again, is billiard balls. The first billiard ball has all the energy. Whatever happens next is entirely dependent on the energy that the first ball had. Now, it's true, the first ball is not going there. It's not going there. The third ball is going into the pocket. But it's going with the energy that was in the first ball. There's nothing that it can do.
All of it.
What?
Some of it.
Whatever's left over. Okay. So it's a little simplistic to think about it like this, because then you can think about it like the body, but it's not. But it's not, because really the billiard balls, all they can do is what the first ball did. That's why it's a good example. They can only roll. The first ball can only roll. The third ball can only roll. Can't do anything else. רק שמכל מקום חסד כלול ומוקף בבחינת החוכמה, loving kindness and entirely encompassed with wisdom, והחוכמה מקפת אותו מכל צד ופינה. And And wisdom is encompassing it from every side. Now, this
Chochmah
language.
is higher than Chesed?
What?
Chochmah is higher than
Of course.
Chesed?
Keter, Chochmah, Binah, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet. So Chesed is right underneath Chochmah.
No, higher in the sense of that it's
And
Chesed can't do anything without.
when you're talking about Ilah ve'alul, yes. We also use the same the same tree of Sfirot to describe things that are not like Ilah ve'alul. So you're right that there are relationships between Chochmah and Chesed where they're not the same. Who had a feeling like that, by the way? Abraham, exactly. How'd you know? Because he says, Elokei Avraham. Who's Elokei Avraham? So our Rizal says, Elokei Avraham, the God of Abraham, is Chochmah. Because he's Chesed, so he's the God, is Chochmah. So everything he does is because of the wisdom. So this language that you just said, להיות יש בדבר בפני, רק שמכל מקום חסד כלול ומוקף בבחינת החוכמה, והחוכמה מקפת אותו מכל צד ופינה. This is the same language he uses in chapter 5 of the Tanya to describe Torah. What is he saying? He's saying if you want to feel something from the world of Atzilus, from the world of emanation, you go to Torah. And in Torah, as opposed to other wisdoms, you will entirely be encompassed in the wisdom, just like things in Atzilus. We talked about this once. Rebbe brings this in a note. He says, if you learn physics, where's the physics? It's in your head. You're encompassing the idea. You're encompassing the idea. But the idea is not encompassing you. Because it's not a garment.
So it hasn't been made into something.
So a person could say, of course it's encompassing you, because you're living in the physical world. He says, no, in the physical world, there's no F equals MA. There's no such thing. That idea, structuring it that way, is not in nature. That's the way human beings understand interaction of forces. Force equals mass times acceleration.
If you throw a ball in the air, it falls to the ground.
Yeah, but you're not encompassed by that.
But it's a fact that you
It's a
have to
fact.
live with, right?
But you can't grasp that fact as just a ball, and once it's over, it's over. If you really want to understand it, you have to learn physics, and you have to learn mathematics. And when you learn mathematics, you're encompassing the idea. We'll say, when do you understand it? When you fully have it inside your mind. But at the same time, you're not encompassed by the idea. It's not a maki for you. You're not included within it. But in Torah, it's not like that. Because the Torah is also a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah to study Torah. So therefore, not only are you encompassing the idea when you understand it in the Torah, but you're also being encompassed by it. And says the Alter Rebbe at the end, "Ve'en yichud nifla kamo." And there's no unification like that. What?
In Tanya.
Okay, chapter 5. So it's almost the same language here. So that's only in Atzilus. So that's what you get. You get a taste of the world of Atzilus. וכמו שכתוב בדיבור המתחיל יביאו לבוש מלכות בעניין אברהם, איבר משהו בחינת חסד נקרא איבר וכלי, להתלבשות בחינת חוכמה, כוח מה, והוא בטל לגבי החוכמה כביטול העלול בעילתו. So that's the example that we just said about Abraham also. אבל בחינת ייחוד התתא דמלכות דאצילות בביאה. So now we have how the Malchus of Atzilus comes down. That's why it's called Yichud HaTatah, and it's connected to the Nukva that we talked about yesterday, to the female, to the feminine aspect of the world. And the feminine, Malchus, goes down into the worlds of Bia, of creation, formation, and action, into the lower worlds, where there's already a separation. הוא גילוי אור אלוקי להוות הבריאה מאין ליש. So he says there's something incredible. That the world of Atzilus is not yet, he says this also in Igerat HaKodesh Kaf, that we'll read soon. But the world of Atzilus does not yet have really the concept of creation ex nihilo. There's no real feeling, there's no real essence there of something from nothing. That only begins, that's why it's called the world of creation, of Bria. Because in Bria you already have Efshariyut HaMetziut, it's called. And what we mean by Efshariyut HaMetziut, the potential for creation, we mean a separate creation. Metziut nifredet. that there can be something separate. In Atzilus, there's nothing separate. Of course, even Atzilus was created something from nothing. But in terms of the creations in Atzilus, meaning whatever was created and lives in the world of Atzilus, it doesn't have an experience. There's no consciousness of being separate. So there's no, in their mind, there's no something from nothing. They're not something from nothing. They don't feel separate from Hashem at all. It's only from creation and down that you feel that like that. So when we say that somebody has a soul from Atzilus, what we're saying is that in their day-to-day life, they don't have an experience of being separate from Hashem. They don't feel like they're a separate creation. And in a certain sense, everybody reaches that before they pass away. Because they're going back to where they came from. So this whole thing of life where they felt separate is now passing, that's what they call it, passes before you. And you see that this was all just an extension of godliness from beginning to end.
When did you see that?
That's what they say. That
When?
when?
Yeah.
It doesn't take much time because it turns out that without the experience of separateness, life is very quick. What draws it out for us, that it feels like it's a long time, is in the moment. But when we think about our past is not that long. It's only here in the present that we feel this separateness. Yeah, about the past, we don't feel the separateness. We don't feel that we were something separate, or at least we don't experience it. We may think of it, we don't experience it. Think about it. If you really want to recollect and remember, like let's say you want to remember what you did yesterday. So yesterday is like a dream. I didn't do anything.
When was yesterday?
Yeah, I didn't do anything. And then somebody tells you, look, retrace your steps because you forgot something somewhere. And then you try to do it. Then you have to, it's as if you're enclosing yourself and garbing yourself in your previous self. And then it takes time. And it's not like a moment. It's not just thinking through it in a second. Like you have to actually, it's as if you're walking. It's like you're putting yourself into that thing, that whatever you did yesterday, and that takes time. Why? Because there's a feeling of being separate. That's the only way you can remember all the details, as it were. That's how we experience it anyway. But at a certain point, you reach this place where you can remember all of it in one moment because you don't need to engarb yourself in the whole process. This is just a moving picture very, very quickly through all the stages. Anyway.
They put Benjamin Fullerfest in solitary confinement many times. And I asked her, how did you manage to survive all those years? She says, it's very simple. She says that first day I was there, I imagined that I'd gone back to Kita Aleph. And I sat myself down and I listened to what the Rebbe said. And for a whole year, I listened to what the Rebbe said in Kita Aleph. The next year, I moved up to Kita Base. And I listened to what the Rebbe said in Kita Base.
And it takes a year.
It took a year. So by the time I was ready to leave that place after 13 years, I'd already got to yeshiva, so there was no problem.
Amazing. Amazing story. And the amazing thing is that it could be that if you really are able to engarb yourself in that previous self, you'll be able to remember enough details that it'll take you a whole year to remember a year. And that's an amazing thing to do. What did Sharansky do? Sharansky played chess against himself.
Right.
So there's no greater feeling of separation playing chess against yourself. Think about it. Because you're splitting your own consciousness already. It's not just that you're...
That's well on the way to schizophrenia. Okay.
No. It's a way to handle things like that. Okay, so that's Malchus of Atzilus when it comes down into Bia. V'davar b'fnei atzmo mamash, abriya yesh gemur. Here he says yesh gemur. Really in other places he says yefshariyut yesh. It's the possibility of there being yesh, but it's a real yesh. A real something, a real being that's already separate from divine consciousness. B'bchina
This
mugbar.
world is real?
This world is separate. Everything is real. The chiddush of this world that we're living in we usually live in these three worlds, creation, formation, and action, is that they feel separate. They feel separate from godliness. בבחינת מוגבל שאין לו ארוך כלל וכלל. And it's limited in a way that what's above it is called ein aroch. This is the big chiddush of Kabbalah. This is the big chiddush of the Arizal. The words ein aroch. It's not just that he uses islapshus. It's not just that he adds this enclothement idea above and beyond what we call devolution, ishtalshlus. There's also this concept that if it's a real separation, then what is above you is without measure different. Ein aroch. You can't translate from the below into the above. There's no translation mechanism. As we used to say, I think we said this a few times, there's no conversion. It's like money that came from outer space, and it's money from, there's no conversion. They mean two different things entirely. You can't convert from one to the other. There's no exchange rate. So you can't exchange anything in the world of creation for something in the world of emanation, of Atzilus. There's no way to translate.
It's creation.
Bria.
These English words.
Bria. Bria Yetzirah Asiyah. שאין לו ארוך כלל וכלל לבחינת הבורא שהוא בלתי מוגבל. And the whole Igeret HaKodesh Kaf is to explain why the spheros in Atzilus are be'ein aroch to the spheros that they are here, as they are here. And there, they're still in a state of lo mugbal, bibli gvul, that they have no end. It's called sfirot en ketz. It's very interesting. I don't know if anybody among the Mekubalim, maybe I'm just ignorant, but I don't remember anybody who orders the different adjectives used to describe the Sfirot the way that the Alter Rebbe does in Igeret HaKodesh Kaf. That there's Sfirot en Ketz, Sfirot Blima, Sfirot en Sof. There's, and then the crowning achievement maybe of Chassidus, which is Ayin Beis from the Rebbe Rashav, which really comes from the Alter Rebbe also. He just developed it. What we call Esel Sfirot Hagnuzot B'Ma'atzilan, that are archived in their emanator, which is how it is in the Keter, apparently, or in the Red Lehavin. So Chassidus is very exact with the language. So if there's different adjectives attached to the Esel Sfirot in different places in the Zohar or in different literature, so the Alter Rebbe explains that each one is talking about something else. So when you talk about Esel Sfirot Ein Ketz, that they have no end, you're talking about the Esel Sfirot and 10 Sfirot in the world of emanation. But the chiddush here is that even though it's ve'in aroch, like we said, it's like the body to the soul. Again, this is islapshus. So the lower is dependent in the sense that it has no life force if there's no connection to the higher. So this body has to be, in a way, nullified, or it has to accept the dominion of the soul.
But something which is at the bottom is also supporting that which is above it.
Why? That's you're like saying, like in space with the woman who came to whatever, I never remember his name, the second guy who understood relativity. He was lecturing, I told you this, he was lecturing in some place in England about relativity, and he explained different things. And then at the end, this little old lady comes to him and says, Professor so-and-so, you made a mistake, but the Earth is not floating in space. He says, really? It's not? What is it? How's it? How's it? Well, something has to hold it up. Everybody knows there's an elephant underneath. So he says, really? What's underneath the elephant? Oh, he says, it's elephants all the way down. Why does something have to support it from the bottom? Nothing has to support it from the bottom.
No, you said there's a bottom there, right? And then it's completely...
It's underneath. Underneath is not spatial. Underneath is in terms of quality. We call it under.
Okay.
We don't mean spatially.
where did these elephants come from?
Same place. England, apparently India, I guess. She was English, I guess, thinking from India. Where do we see this? We see that the stars and the planets are going around in a circle, and the circle meant, so that this is exactly what it means. Because we said that in the first example, we said that was igulim, that it's circular, that one encompasses the other. So you have to understand, since we're not talking spatially, why in the world would you use a circle? So the reason you use a circle is because, again, the point is that it's entirely encompassed. You could do it with a square also, but there's nothing as perfect as a circle, and there's a lot of things about that. But really the reason was because they imagined that the planets were traveling in a sphere, in a circle, around the Earth, the Sun, it doesn't matter. The point was that circular motion, where you constantly come back to your source in a circle, indicates that you're constantly looking at the center point. And how did they know this? Because they all knew how to throw a rugatka. How do you say rugatka? A slingshot.
Okay.
Everybody knew what a slingshot was. So that's centripetal motion. Centrifugal or centripetal? So the centrifugal is what's happening, the force pulling out, and the centripetal is what's pulling it in. Why doesn't it go flying off? So they felt the tension in the string. So they understood there's something connecting it. So even if you don't see what's connecting the planets to the center of their gravity, of their motion, what they're spinning around, there must be some force not allowing them to fly out. And anybody who's ever done anything with a slingshot knows this. It's just like...
How do you release the stone in the middle of the slingshot?
I haven't done anything with a slingshot. I guess there's a way to like jerk it so that the stone falls out. And then the stone goes flying off. But that's exactly what you do. You release it from the centripetal force and you send it off with a centrifugal force. Because now they're not balancing each other. So they knew there must be something that's holding the planets facing in. They called that the power of nullification. That was the name of the centripetal force before Newton. But it's the same thing. There's no difference. It's just he didn't know it was called gravity.
Newton was about the same time as the Arizal, no?
No, he's a little bit later. He was more in 1620, if I'm not mistaken.
Erich,
Rizal passed away in 1573.
Okay, so it's
1572.
over the last 5,000 years, it's close.
But again, this is an ancient idea from the Greeks. And Chazal took it. They accepted this entirely. Again, somebody will rewrite history now, will say the Greeks got it from Yirmiyahu. It doesn't really matter. Whoever. Okay. So that's called
Why do we
Bitul.
make this big issue of the sun bowing down?
The sun's not bowing down. The planets are bowing down to the sun.
Okay, but we say that the sun and the moon have never changed their path. And so they do the will of Hashem. But they were created in such a way that there's nothing else they can do. The sun can't change its orbit.
They don't have free will. They're locked in their state of bowing down.
So why do we say, look at the sun and look at the moon? They don't get a reward and they don't get a punishment. They do what Hashem wants and they go around the same ways they're always supposed to.
So the thinking there was that if they, who are so much greater than I, and greatness you can see by immortality, they never die. I do.
But they don't get a choice.
But they have something that I don't have, which is immortality. So they're greater than me in being closer to perfection. Perfection in the ancient world, and maybe even today, is not a measure of free will. Perfection is a measure of how complete and eternal you are. And they were completely round, considered to be perfectly round, which they're not, but it doesn't matter, they're close enough. And eternal. So they were much more perfect than we are. And yet they bow down to Hashem. They were created that way. That's perfection. Hashem created something perfect in reality. That's what's perfect. Again, it was a symbol. I don't know how much the wise people actually thought that the planets have some kind of consciousness. I'm not sure. Or rather that they saw it the way that you're describing it now, which is they were endowed with these character traits. It's not that they reached this perfection from their own. So it's not, there's no consciousness the way we understand consciousness here. In the same way that we wouldn't talk about an animal having some kind of great consciousness, because they don't have free will. They don't have at least the degree of free will that we're used to. But again, we don't have free will so much. We have very little free will. We talked about that.
No, to choose to be right or to be bad or good.
Yeah. We have the choice to either say Hashem is a tzaddik or not. We have very little control beyond that. Whether to be positive and accepting. And you see that all the letters of the Rebbe in the end of fostering optimism in people is trying to get them to acknowledge that Hashem is good. That's all. Just acknowledge that He's good. That's optimism. And things change for the better because of your outlook on God. The more you understand the world is being run by God, and you understand that Hashem is good, and that's your real choice, to choose to make your world one that's run by a good God, the more your reality becomes good. Because really that's all you can choose. Okay.
Okay, so choose life.
So now, Lehavin ze b'tosefet. So all this is to create you have to go already. So what are we going to do? What are we going to do with Thursday?
Thursday I'm going to be in Sfat, busy with the show.
So I hear. You want to come tomorrow?
No, I can't. Maybe I can't because I work tomorrow in Tel Aviv. Unless you would. No, even if I come very early, it doesn't.